What if the single biggest thing raising your risk of memory loss later on in life wasn't your genes? It wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't something written into you at birth, but a mistake that you're making right now, today, without even realizing it. Because that is roughly where the science has landed on this particular point. The biggest reviews of the evidence suggest that up to around 45% of dementia, so nearly half of all cases, could be prevented or delayed by things that we have real control over. We tend to picture dementia and memory loss. I know they're not the same thing, but we tend to picture these things as, the way we picture cancer as just bad luck that either finds you or it doesn't. It's just one of those things that happens when you get older. But the thing is, around 4 in 10 cancers in adults are preventable as well. And dementia sits in exactly that same bracket. So what I'm going to do in this video is walk you through 3 mistakes that people commonly make in their 50s and 60s that very slowly stack the odds against your brain. I'm going to explain what each one does to your brain, and then right at the end, I'm going to give you the number 1 mistake, the one that surprises almost everybody that I tell it to, and the one that I would fix first if it was me or my own family. My name's Dr. Alex. I'm here to help you cut through all of this noise and help you live a longer and healthier life along the way. Now, I've said this a few times in recent videos, but remember that modern life is built to make you sick very slowly, and modern medicine is built to meet you there once it has already happened, like a heart attack. Ill, but not dead. That is the business model of modern life. Nobody in modern medicine or in the pharmaceutical industry or anything like that, nobody gets paid for preventing anything. Nobody gets paid if you prevent dementia in yourself, but people do get paid when they start giving you tablets and other therapies and other things that you've got to pay for once that dementia has already been diagnosed. And that is why I started this channel in the first place, to help you prevent the diseases that I see all the time in the first place. And here's the thing that nobody tells you about dementia. Dementia doesn't start in your 70s. It starts literally, and I mean literally, decades earlier, often in your 40s and 50s, laying down damage very silently in your brain long before a single symptom actually appears. Now, to see why, you need to know a little bit about proteins. So proteins are the tiny building blocks that do almost every job inside your cells. And to work properly, they've got to fold up into very neat, precise shapes, if that makes sense. In Alzheimer's, which is the most common form of dementia, certain proteins fold the wrong way and then in turn become a bit sticky. And instead of being cleared away, like all proteins will be at some point, they clump together. They form plaques between your brain cells and sort of create tangles inside of them. Those clumps, they sort of clog up the connections that your brain cells use to talk to each other. And over time, the cells become starved and they die. This is what builds up very early on, decades before a diagnosis actually appears. And the thing is, when we actually scan the brains of healthy volunteers, or when pathologists actually examine the brain after death, they find these sticky proteins literally accumulating 10, 15, even 20 years before that person ever had a problem with their memory. So by the time the symptoms start to show, that process has been well underway for the best part of 2 decades. And I know that I talk about that all the time. I talk about how things start decades earlier than you ever think they do, but it's really important and it's really alarming. Because the flip side is where the good news is. It means that the years where you can do the most about your risk, where you can do all of this good work, are the very years when you feel completely fine and you're most able to make these changes. That window is wide open right now while nothing feels wrong, and that head start is worth far more than any treatment we can offer once the damage is done. But remember, even if you're already suffering from a bit of memory loss, it is never ever too late to start making some positive changes and slowing down that decline and completely changing your trajectory. So mistake number one is brushing off and not paying attention to a slowly rising blood sugar over time. If your doctor has ever told you that your blood sugar is a little bit high but nothing to worry about, and you just carried on exactly as you were before with just, the same lifestyle habits as you were before, then this is the first mistake to know about. Letting your blood sugar drift up year after year and treating it as a normal part of getting older is honestly one of the most common things I see. And your brain really doesn't like that. Think about how many people you know with diabetes or pre-diabetes now. It just feels normal, doesn't it? Almost sort of background noise. Well, everybody gets diabetes these days. But this is a serious disease, and it was rare in the decades before ultra-processed food and machines that now do everything for us. Back then, so back in the age of your great-grandparents or whatever, we ate real whole foods and we moved all day, every day. And that is exactly what protects against a high blood sugar. Even today, in parts of the world where people are active from morning until night and aren't living on packaged food, you barely see pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes in these parts of the world at all. And here's what high blood sugar does to your brain. So when it runs high for very long periods, like years, the excess sugar sticks to the proteins all over your body and damages them. And it is especially hard on the tiny, delicate blood vessels that feed your brain, starving small regions of the oxygen and the nutrients that they need. On top of that, the insulin resistance behind high blood sugar seems to stop your brain cells taking up and using energy properly. That link is strong enough that now some doctors actually call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes to capture how tightly blood sugar and brain health are tied together. This is where a very simple annual blood test earns its place. It's called HbA1c. Most of you will know that. And it measures your average blood sugar over the past 2 or 3 months by looking at how much sugar sticks to the protein in your red blood cells. So one good day or one bad day can't fool it. It is an average over 3 months. And the reason it matters so much is that insulin resistance builds for years, often starting when you're much younger, long before you feel a single thing. And honestly, I would argue that anybody over the age of 30 should spend a bit of money each year tracking this particular number, and also a fasting insulin if you can get that as well, because it's cheap, it is easy, and it's one of the earliest warning lights that you will ever get. And the fix isn't really exotic or expensive, it's just the stuff that I talk about all the time. It is real food instead of refined carbohydrates. It is walking after your meals, or preferably being active all day and sitting very little, so your muscles soak up the sugar, and also a bit of strength training as well to build the tissue that actually stores that sugar. Every one of those habits moves you closer to the way that your ancestors used to live all day, every day. And together, they are stronger than any pill that we've got for diabetes. Those things that I talked about, so moving regularly, strength work, and cutting out ultra-processed foods is more powerful than metformin, which is the most common drug that we prescribe for diabetes. The next mistake is so gentle and so reasonable that good and sensible people fall into this without ever noticing. So as we move through our 50s and into our 60s, we slowly stop doing the things that stretch us. Maybe that's the hobby that used to challenge us and frustrate us. That hobby gets pushed to one side because we're busy, or we just don't feel like it these days. Or maybe the circle of friends that we used to see every week gets smaller and smaller as people move away or drift out of touch, and we don't quite replace those friends. And bit by bit, the physical stuff gets easier as well. So we take the car instead of walking, and we use the lift or the elevator instead of taking the stairs. And look, obviously I understand why this happens, because life is tiring and comfort is right there for the taking. And after decades of hard work, it feels like something that you've earned. Why should I always be walking up the stairs at the age of 60 when I've got the elevator instead? I get it. But the thing is, your muscles and also your brain works on a strict use it or lose it basis. Think of the connections between your brain cells like paths worn through a field, like a big, wheat field where people are walking all the time, and there is a distinct path where people walk. Every time you learn something that's really difficult, or you have a proper back and forth, in a conversation that makes you think, or you push your body past what feels easy, you walk those paths and keep them really clear. And you even wear in new paths as well. But if you stop using those paths, like any path across a field, then they will just grow over. Those paths will disappear. That is how you build what's called cognitive reserve, which is a kind of buffer. And it's sort of why two people with the same physical changes in the brain can have completely different symptoms, because the one with more reserve can absorb more damage before anything shows. A very soft and comfortable and isolated life strips away the exact stimulation the aging brain needs the most. The people who stay sharp into old age are over and over the ones still doing the things that challenge them. So that might be joining a dance class or a circuit training class or a Pilates class or something like that, or picking up a new language or doing puzzles or reading every day, learning an instrument. It is never too late to learn how to play something. I play the drums and guitar, and I've not done that for a good few years, but I fully intend on picking those back up later on in life. Or it could just simply be staying in the thick of other people's company and remaining really socially active. Anything that makes your brain work a bit harder than it actually wants to absolutely counts here. And then finally, we've got the number one mistake that so many people make. If I could get everybody over the age of 50 to do one single thing for their brain, it would be this. And it's one that almost nobody guesses. The biggest single modifiable risk factor for dementia, according to the major Lancet Commission that literally pulled together the best evidence that we have, is untreated hearing loss in midlife. This one really does hit close to home for me because both my dad and my father-in-law have pretty bad hearing. My dad spent, well, he still is a paramedic. He spent his whole working life as a paramedic with the sirens going on full blast. And then my father-in-law, Paul, he's a builder and used to be a farmer as well, who has used power tools for decades, and he has never worn ear defenders, no protection for his ears at all, no matter how many times people have told him to put them on. So I've watched up close what fading hearing does to somebody. Now, I'm not saying that they've got dementia. Obviously, I'm not saying that. But it's very clear in conversations, that they can't hear as well as other people their age. And here's how it damages the brain. And there are two parts to it. So the first one is that when your hearing starts to go, and it usually fades so gradually that you don't actually even notice it, your brain has to work far harder to make sense of every muffled, half-heard word. That constant effort drains resources away from memory and thinking, and it literally runs all day, every day for years. The second one, and this is the bigger one, people whose hearing is fading slowly pull away from the world around them. Conversations become tiring and a bit embarrassing sometimes, so they stop going to the noisy family dinner, they stop phoning friends, they stop joining in conversation, and they retreat into a smaller, quieter life. That withdrawal, that lack of stimulation and connection is exactly the soil in which cognitive decline takes root. This Lancet Commission, and I'll put a link in the description below for you, it found that hearing loss accounts for a bigger slice of preventable dementia than almost any other single factor that we know of. So those are the 3 mistakes, and it'll be really interesting to hear in the comments how many of these resonate with you personally. But let me just be really clear. These modifiable factors added together, are thought to account for up to around 45, maybe half, 50% of dementia cases, which is a huge and hopeful share. These are the things that we can change. But it obviously also means that the rest still comes down to age and genetics and things that we cannot control. So nobody watching should feel guilt or blame. If you have memory loss or dementia and you have, accounted for all of these things, you've really led a great life, then it could just be one of those things that was going to happen to you anyway. Like I said, it only accounts for around up to half of cases. The whole point of this channel and everything I talk about is trying to increase your odds, trying to stack the deck in your favor by doing the things that we can control. Remember, treating your hearing keeps you in the conversation, it keeps you engaged, it keeps you connected to other people, and connection is one of the strongest protectors of the brain that we actually have. Treating your hearing, which is gradually fading, just as a bit of vanity or something to put it with while you turn the telly up louder and louder every year, that is the real mistake. Getting it checked is really, really easy. Most high streets have a hearing centre or an optician's that will also check your hearing as well, or a pharmacy that also checks your hearing. Loads of places do it. It is quick, it's often free, or at least very, very cheap. And it's one of the best investments in your health that you can make. So if you take just one thing from this video today, it might be as simple as booking a hearing test, especially if you've caught yourself turning up the volume or asking people to repeat themselves more than you used to. And I would say if you're over the age of 50, even if you think your hearing is okay, just book a hearing test anyway, because it might surprise you and they may be able to treat something that you didn't know you had or give you some advice, or at least, that could be the start of an annual hearing test so they've got a baseline to work from. And please remember, none of these 3 is the whole